Chapter 1. The Young Sailor. The sea was calm, and the evening sun painted the water gold. The ship Pharaon sailed proudly into the harbor of Marseille. At the front of the ship stood a young man with bright eyes and a confident smile, Edmond Dantès. He was only 19 years old, but already a skilled sailor. Everyone on the ship respected him. "Land ahead!" cried one of the sailors. Edmond turned to the crew. "Prepare to anchor. We are home, my friends." The men cheered. They had been at sea for months, carrying goods from distant lands. Now they could finally rest, see their families, and enjoy the warmth of home. When the ship stopped, Edmond immediately took care of his duties. He was responsible and honest. The captain had died during the voyage, and Edmond had taken command, guiding the ship safely back to France. Even the ship's owner, Monsieur Morel, praised him. "Edmond," Morel said with a smile, "you have done the work of a true captain. I will speak to the company. The next voyage, the position will be yours." Edmond's face lit up. "Thank you, sir. It's all I ever wanted." He could hardly believe his luck. A few days ago, he was a sailor. Now, he was about to become a captain, and soon he would marry the woman he loved, Mercedes. Edmond ran through the streets of Marseille, his heart beating fast. He went first to a small house near the port where his old father lived. "Father," he cried, pushing open the door. His father, weak and thin, looked up. "Edmond, my son." He stood up and hugged him tightly. "You look so tired," Edmond said. "Have you been eating well?" The old man smiled softly. "When you are at sea, I lose my appetite. But now that you are home, I will eat again." Edmond noticed a small table. There was very little food. He frowned. "Did Monsieur Morel send you money?" "I received some," the old man said quietly. "But I paid your debt to the tailor. I didn't want people to think Captain Dantès' father owed money." Edmond hugged him again, tears in his eyes. "You shouldn't have done that. You know I would have paid it myself. Don't worry, my boy. You're here now. Everything will be fine." After leaving his father with food and money, Edmond hurried to the small house on the hill where Mercedes lived. She ran out to meet him, her dark eyes shining with joy. "Edmond, you're back." He caught her in his arms. "I promised I would return, didn't I?" They sat together by the sea, talking about their future. They planned to marry in a few days, after Edmond delivered a small letter from the captain, a message for a man in Paris. But not everyone was happy for Edmond. Two men watched from the shadows. One was Danglars, the ship's accountant. He envied Edmond's quick rise in the company. "The boy will become captain before me," he said angrily. The other was Fernand, Mercedes' cousin. His eyes were full of jealousy. He loved her in secret and hated Edmond for winning her heart. Together, Danglars whispered, "We can stop him. He has an enemy and doesn't even know it." Fernand frowned. "How?" "Leave it to me," Danglars said. "He carries a letter from Napoleon's followers. If someone told the police, they would think Edmond was a traitor." That night, while Edmond and Mercedes celebrated their engagement with friends, Danglars wrote a fake letter to the police. It said that Edmond Dantès was bringing secret messages from Napoleon, the enemy of the king. The next morning was bright and peaceful. The bells of Marseille rang, and the air was full of joy. Edmond and Mercedes stood at the church door, ready to be married. Guests smiled and threw flowers. Suddenly, A group of soldiers arrived. Their leader stepped forward. Edmond Dantès? Yes, Edmund said politely. That's me. In the name of the law, you are under arrest. The crowd gasped. Mercedes cried out, there must be some mistake. But the soldiers surrounded Edmund and led him away. He tried to speak, but they refused to listen. He was taken to a dark office where a young judge named Villefort waited. Villefort looked serious, but not cruel. Dantès, he said, you are accused of carrying a letter from the enemy. Do you have such a letter? Yes, Edmund answered honestly. It was given to me by my captain before he died. I didn't even read it. I was told to deliver it to someone in Paris. Villefort opened the letter and read it quickly. His face changed color. The letter was addressed in Wartier, Villefort's own father, who secretly supported Napoleon. For a moment, Villefort was silent. He realized that if this letter became known, his family's name would be ruined. He should have freed Edmond. The boy was innocent, but his fear was stronger than his sense of justice. He stood up. I will take care of this matter myself, he said coldly. Guards, take him away. Wait! Edmund cried. I swear I am innocent. But his words were useless. The guards dragged him out. Villefort threw the letter into fire and whispered to himself, no one must ever know. That night, Edmund was taken by boat to a dark island outside Marseille, the shut of a fortress prison for dangerous criminals. When the boat stopped, he was pushed inside a stone cell. The door closed with a heavy sound. Clang. He shouted and begged the guard to explain, but they ignored him. I am not a traitor, he cried. I did nothing wrong. Days passed, then weeks, then months. Edmund's clothes became torn, his hair long. The light came only through a small hole high on the wall. He counted the days by scratching marks into the stone. Each time he heard footsteps, he hoped someone would come to free him, but no one did. At first, he believed that justice would save him. Then he began to doubt. Finally, he felt despair. He threw himself on the floor and whispered, Why? Why me? Time lost meaning. Edmund no longer knew how long he had been there. Maybe 5 years, maybe 10. He often thought of his father and Mercedes. He imagined them crying, waiting for him, or perhaps believing he was dead. Sometimes he prayed. Other times he shouted at the walls. I will escape, he said one night, or I will die trying. He began to test the stones with a piece of metal he found near his bed. The work was slow and painful. Then one night, he heard a strange sound. Scratch, scratch, scratch. He froze. It came from the wall next to him. Is it a rat? He whispered. But the sound was too steady. He put his ear to the wall. Someone was digging from the other side. Hey, he called softly. Who's there? The sound stopped. Then a quiet voice answered. A friend, if you're not a spy. For many nights, the two men talked through the wall. The voice belonged to Abbé Faria, an Italian priest who had been in prison for a long time. He was trying to dig a tunnel to freedom, but had chosen the wrong direction. Finally, one day, a small hole opened between their cells, and Edmund saw the face of an old man with bright, intelligent eyes. Thank God, Faria said, smiling, a human voice again. From that day, Edmund's life changed. He was no longer alone. Faria taught him languages, science, history, and mathematics. The world may have forgotten us, Faria said, but we can still grow wiser here. Edmund learned quickly. You have taught me more than any school, he said gratefully. Faria also helped him understand the truth about his betrayal. When Edmond told him his story, Faria thought carefully. "My dear boy," he said, "you were the victim of jealousy and fear. Danglars hated you because you were better than him. Fernand loved your fiancée. And Villefort, he feared losing his career. Together, they destroyed you." Edmond clenched his fists. "Then I will destroy them in return." Faria looked at him kindly. "Be careful, Edmond. Hatred can eat your soul. Wait and hope." Edmond nodded, but deep inside, a fire was burning. The two prisoners continued to work on the tunnel. It was long and dangerous, but it gave them purpose. They shared food, dreams, and ideas. Sometimes Faria became ill, but he never stopped teaching. He showed Edmond how to read secret codes, how to plan, and how to think like a free man, even in chains. Then one terrible day, Faria collapsed. Edmond rushed to his side. "My friend," he cried. "What's happening?" Faria smiled weakly. "It's the end, my son. My body is old. But listen carefully. I must tell you something before I die." He reached under his bed and took out a small piece of cloth. Inside was a tiny map. "This," he whispered, "is the secret of my family. On the island of Monte Cristo, there is a treasure, gold jewels, more than you can imagine. I give it to you, my son. Use it for good, not for evil." Edmond held the old man's hand as he died. For a long time, he sat beside the body, unable to move. The only friend he had ever known was gone. But in his heart, a plan was forming, a plan that would change everything. Chapter 2: The Island of Secrets. The next morning, guards came to carry away the priest's body. They wrapped it in a sack and tied it with rope, preparing to bury it in the sea. But before they came, Edmond had replaced the body inside the sack with himself. He tied the ropes tightly around his own body and stayed completely still. When the guards arrived, they never noticed a change. They carried the dead body to a small cart and took it outside. As the cart moved, Edmond could hear the sea wind. His heart pounded wildly. Then a heavy splash. Cold water closed over his head. Edmond cut the rope with a small knife he had hidden in his sleeve. He rose to the surface, gasping for air. Above him, the stars shone like diamonds. After 14 years in darkness, Edmond Dantès was finally free. For several days, Edmond floated and swam through the sea, resting on pieces of wood. A passing ship rescued him, a group of smugglers who believed he was a sailor lost in a storm. They took him on board and gave him food. Edmond worked with them for months, keeping his real name secret. One day, the smugglers planned a trip to a small rocky island near Italy, the island of Monte Cristo. Edmond's heart began to beat faster. This was the place Abbé Faria had spoken of. He pretended not to care, but when they arrived, he asked to stay behind and hunt for goats. When the others left, Edmond began to search the island carefully. He climbed cliffs, looked under stones, and explored caves. At last, deep inside a dark tunnel, he found an iron chest buried under heavy rocks. He knelt down, trembling, and opened it. Inside, golden coins shone in the torchlight. There were jewels, diamonds, and precious stones, more wealth than he had ever imagined. He fell to his knees and whispered, "Thank you, Abbé Faria. I will use this gift as you wished." The treasure changed everything. Edmond Dantès, The poor sailor no longer existed. With his new fortune, he could become whoever he wanted. He traveled across Europe, learning more about the world. He bought fine clothes, jewels, horses, and a magnificent ship. He spoke with nobles and scholars, but never revealed his true identity. He became known as a mysterious and elegant Count of Monte Cristo. People said he came from the East, others said from Spain or India, but no one knew for sure. Under this new name, he returned quietly to France. But his heart was no longer filled only with wonder. It was filled with memory and with a desire for justice. He remembered the faces of Danglars, Fernand, and Villefort, the men who had destroyed his life. Now he had power, knowledge, and wealth beyond imagination, and with those weapons, he would make them face the truth. Before beginning his mission, the Count visited Marseille in secret. He walked the same streets he once knew as a young man. Many things had changed, new shops, new faces, but the smell of the sea was still the same. He visited the small house where his father had lived. It was empty now, cold and silent. On the wall, he found an old note from a neighbor telling how his father had died from hunger and sadness soon after Edmond's arrest. Tears fell down his face. "I will not let his death be forgotten," Edmond whispered. He then went to the house of Mercedes, but the house was no longer hers. The people said she had married Fernand Mondego, who had become a rich and powerful man. Hearing this, Edmond's heart broke again, but this time the pain turned into steel. The boy who once dreamed of love was gone. In his place stood a man who would bring justice to the world, a man who had waited and hoped. Before leaving Marseille, the Count went one last time to the sea. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gold and red. He stood there for a long time, listening to the waves. "Abbe Faria," he said softly, "you gave me knowledge and freedom. Now I must finish what fate began." He turned away from the sea and walked back toward his ship. His eyes were calm, but behind them burned a quiet fire. He was no longer a victim. He was the Count of Monte Cristo, and his story of revenge, justice, and forgiveness was only beginning. Chapter 3: The Revenge and Forgiveness. 10 years had passed since Edmond Dantès escaped from prison. Now, as the Count of Monte Cristo, he was one of the richest and most mysterious men in Europe. When he arrived in Paris, the city was alive with music, lights, and gossip. Everyone wanted to meet the Count, a man who seemed to know everything and everyone, yet no one knew him. He lived in a grand house filled with gold books and art from all over the world. He spoke kindly, but always with calm distance. People admired him, but they also feared him. In secret, the Count studied the lives of 3 men: Danglars, the greedy banker; Fernand, now Count de Morcerf, the man who married Mercedes; Villefort, the judge who had sent him to prison. The time of waiting was over. Now it was time for justice. Danglars had become one of the richest men in Paris. He lived in luxury, but thought only of profit. He loved money more than people, and his greed made him cruel. The Count slowly began to destroy him, not with violence, but with intelligence. He invested in Danglars' bank and made secret moves to manipulate the markets. Soon, Danglars began to lose money. He tried to recover it by taking bigger risks, but each time he failed. Finally, his bank collapsed. One evening, the Count met him face to face for the first time. "Do you remember a young sailor named Edmond Dantès?" the Count asked quietly. Danglars turned pale. No, I don't know him, he stammered. The Count's eyes shone coldly. Perhaps not, but you destroyed his life for money. Now money destroys you. He turned and left, leaving Danglars trembling and broken. The man who once loved gold now begged for bread. Fernand Mondego, now a general and nobleman, lived in a palace with his wife Mercedes and their son Albert. The Count entered their world slowly, as a polite guest. He helped Albert in a duel, saved his honor, and soon became close to the family. But Mercedes, when she looked into the Count's eyes, felt something familiar. Her heart beat faster, as if she were seeing a ghost. One day, when they were alone, she said softly, "Who are you?" "Your voice, your eyes, they remind me of someone I once loved." The Count looked at her silently. For the first time, his heart trembled. Then he said, "That man is dead." Tears filled her eyes. "Edmond Dantès, you are alive." He said nothing, only turned away. The silence between them was full of memories, love, loss, and pain. Later, the Count revealed Fernand's darkest secret. Years ago, Fernand had betrayed his own commander to the enemy for money. When this truth became public, Fernand lost his honor. Mercedes and her son left him in shame. Unable to bear it, Fernand ended his own life. The Count watched from afar. His revenge was complete, but his heart was heavy. Now only one man remained, Villefort, the judge who had condemned Edmond without a trial. The Count discovered that Villefort had hidden a terrible crime. Years ago, he had buried a baby alive to protect his reputation. The Count brought the truth to light step by step, like a master justice. He revealed Villefort's lies in public and forced him to face his own conscience. Villefort's world collapsed. His family turned against him, and madness took over his mind. He screamed that God was punishing him, and perhaps, in a way, it was true. When the Count saw Villefort broken and insane, he felt no joy. He felt only emptiness. He whispered to himself, "I wanted justice, not this. Have I become like the men I hated? Among all this destruction, there were innocent people, and the Count saw them too." He had saved a young man named Maximilian Morel, the son of his old employer, who once helped him as a sailor. Maximilian was in love with Valentine, Villefort's kind and gentle daughter. Their love was pure, untouched by greed or lies. When Valentine was poisoned by her own family, the Count secretly saved her life. He hid her away safely, while everyone believed she was dead. When Maximilian wanted to end his life from grief, the Count stopped him. "Wait," he said. "Hope." Then, on a quiet morning, he led Maximilian to a garden, and there stood Valentine, alive. Maximilian fell to his knees and wept with joy. The Count smiled for the first time in years. Before leaving France, the Count visited Mercedes one last time. She lived simply now, far from the luxury she once knew. When she saw him, she smiled sadly. "You have punished those who wronged you," she said. "But are you happy?" The Count looked at her. "I don't know. I thought revenge would bring peace, but my heart is still heavy." Mercedes took his hand. "Then forgive, Edmond. Forgive them and forgive yourself. The man I loved long ago was kind and good. I hope he still lives inside you." Her words pierced his soul. He realized that while he had escaped from prison, he had never truly been free. Not from anger, not from hate. The Count returned to the sea, the same sea that had once carried him to freedom. He sailed to a quiet island with Maximilian and Valentine. There, he told them his story, from the young sailor to the prisoner, the student, and the avenger. "I have learned," he said softly, "that happiness is not in wealth or power. It is in forgiveness, love, and hope." He gave Maximilian and Valentine part of his fortune and said goodbye. They begged him to stay, but he only smiled. "My time here's over. The world belongs to you now." Then he sailed away, his ship disappearing slowly into the horizon. On the deck of his ship, the Count watched the sun rise over the calm blue sea. For the first time in many years, he felt peace in his heart. He thought of Abbe Faria, of Mercedes, of all the people he had met. He whispered the last words that his old teacher had once said. All human wisdom is contained in these two words, wait and hope. And with that, the Count of Monte Cristo disappeared into legend, not as a man of revenge, but as a man who had finally found freedom.